Welcome to Co-Opinions. My name is Josh, and today we're doing a very special mini episode. I have Brent on with me.
Yep.
And I have Jake on with me.
Hello.
And I'm going to go ahead and lead off with this. Nintendo just announced their new console the other day, the Switch. They showed a short 3.5-minute teaser trailer, and it gave us a lot of interesting information that people have been speculating on, and they've been talking about how it tied into the rumors that we've been hearing for literally months leading up to it. I'm going to start with the very most basic component of this, the name. I saw a lot of people divided on the name Switch. Now, Brent, I know you were not a fan of the name Switch.
Yeah, it's weird.
Now, why were you not a fan of the name?
I don't know. The NX felt like a better name.
Now, tell me why the NX felt like a better name.
Concise, small, I guess.
But it wasn't small, though. It was longer in terms of acronym, like NX. That's 2 syllables. Switch is a single syllable. It's punchier. You don't have to abbreviate Switch at all because it's just a single thing. So, and we've been over this before. What would NX have even stood for?
I don't know.
You do know because you told me.
I'm not being drawn into this, so okay. No, I don't know.
In case you were curious, Jake, Brent thought that NX could stand for next.
You are an asshole.
That's not an acronym. Then it's big N, little e, big X, little... It's not the 90s. That's some Gen X nonsense.
Yes, but very rarely has a project name ever been really made sense. I mean, look at Xbox and the Project Scorpio.
Project Scorpio, the GameCube was called the Dolphin, the Wii was called the Revolution.
Right.
This happened across the board. A lot of people, like Brent, weren't a fan of the name weren't a fan of the name Switch. And I'm trying to pull out why they're not a fan of it, because in addition to Switch being a snappy name that communicates what the system does, it can switch from being portable to handheld. It can switch from how you're using the controller setup. In addition to that, it just really communicates what it does. So I think it's a really solid name, and there will be no confusion. Because had they called it the Wii U 2, Nintendo would have done some nonsense like made it the Wii U TOO. You know they would have done it. There is no confusion that this is a new thing.
Yeah, and to be fair, the name Wii is really pretty awful in terms of like a marketing concept. And I understand that, they're Japanese. It's a completely different thing for them than it is for us. But in America, it always kind of elicited giggles from most people I know.
It elicited giggles, but in the same way, you couldn't abbreviate Wii. It was short enough. But let's focus on the Switch. So what were some other things that jumped out in this preview trailer to all of you? I know one thing, Brent, you have a list of rumors you're just giddy that were confirmed. Because I kept saying that Nintendo never told us anything, though. That was my stance.
But overwhelmingly, when it comes to consoles, for the past several, handheld and consoles, the rumors have been pretty accurate. The Wii U rumors were pretty spot on. Basically an HD Wii with the gamepad, dual screen functionality, all that stuff.
But there were so many rumors coming out so constantly, like it was... Almost every day, you're like, what do you think of this rumor? What do you think of this rumor?
Well, and
Nintendo we just talked about the same rumors over and over again, honestly.
Okay.
Nintendo is also rather secretive about a lot of their projects. They keep a tight lip, and a lot of times what gets out is kind of what they want to get out.
And that's why I feel like the rumors are something they do on their own. Like, some of these rumors are stuff they leak.
So speaking of rumors that got confirmed, what does everybody think about the fact that it's looking like the media that will be used for the Switch is going to be some kind of game card, memory card, cartridge type thing?
Well, I mean, it makes sense in today's era because you either have to be able to download something, which, I mean, you have to have an internet connection to be able to do that, or it has to be small and easily portable, something you're not going to get on something like a compact disc. Well, DVD, whatever. Plus, then you have a lot of added complications of a moving device, like a CD-ROM or a disc that spins.
And that was the point that I brought up talking to somebody else, because they go, isn't it kind of weird that they came back around to cartridges? And I go, the capacity just finally caught up with the speed. If it's supposed to be a portable thing, you couldn't have a spinning disc. Even a disc drive has the complications of being moved around. This is essentially just going to be an enormous flash drive that they're using. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Jake, but that's what I heard is these are going to be, is it RAM or ROM chips?
I thought it was RAM chips.
Well, if it was RAM, it would be NVRAM. So it would be more akin to like an SSD or a flash drive than it would be like memory. But I would be willing to believe that it's probably both. That they'll have a flash-capable version, and then they'll have game cartridges that you can load the games off of.
Okay. And this does one thing that you were considerably concerned about, Brent, and that was a digital-only console. So you've got to be pretty stoked that's not a thing. And there was such massive backlash from Microsoft when they talked about having to authenticate games. It wasn't even downloading everything.
Well, just had to be online just to use it. Which
on top of that, there was backlash, but you have companies like AT&T and Verizon who want to push for this stuff, though they don't want to keep up the hardware to do it, but they want this all digital stuff. So, but
it's not an issue, so it's whatever. I'm a little curious if these chips, now you said it was NRAM?
And NVRAM, it stands for non-volatile.
So does that mean you can write to it as well as read from it?
Yeah, so RAM in general you can write to, like computer memory is write to, but it requires...
It's real short-term memory.
Right, it requires electricity to always be to it in order to keep that charge. That's what makes it volatile. The second it loses electricity, it loses all of its data too. NVRAM, non-volatile, means that it doesn't require electricity to be constantly flowing through it to keep its memory state.
Okay, and I know that once upon a time, with previous games, consoles, generations, they used lithium-ion batteries to save data. The problem with that was after 10, 15 years, the batteries would die, you would lose all the data. Do you run a similar risk for that with NVRAM, which is still a decade off, but can the NVRAM lose the information stored on it?
Technically, yes, but the way it works is more based off of the reads and writes that are put to it. SSDs have the same problem. If you have a computer, an SSD will slowly deteriorate its speed and eventually lose its data state over more and more reads and writes. The difference is a disk, like a spinning disk, regular hard drive, is going to fail faster than an SSD would.
Fancy that.
So the NVRAM situation is going to be better in terms of longevity than even a hard drive would be. Now, hopefully they're sourcing their memory chips from a decent manufacturer, which knowing Nintendo, they will.
They'd mentioned, actually, this was how we got the idea a long time ago.
The cartridge rumor came from the company that makes the chips.
I know it was a major manufacturer, and I can't remember who it was.
I'm sure it's someone like SanDisk.
Well, they were the ones who made the cartridges for the 3DS. Almost positive. So.
Okay. So that covers the whole digital versus non-digital. What do you think? Here's the big one: the fact it can go from console to portable. Now, Jake, okay, Brent, let's get that smug look.
This is what I wanted from a video game. This is what I wanted the Wii U to be able to do. So, for me, this is a dream come true in a console. So
now it's a dream come true, but I ask this. It might come across cynical. How often would you use the portable aspect of it outside of your house?
No, it depends. Like, if I had to go over here, yeah. If I could take major games with me outside of portable games, yeah, I would.
Well, and that actually brings up another interesting point that we'll get to in a minute, and that has to do with the battery life I'm supremely curious about. But we're going to... Actually, you might be able to tie these two together, Jake, because you talked about, based on the chipset of the Switch, what you thought that the battery life would potentially be, what the graphical output capabilities could potentially be. Let's go for it.
So the general expectation, and I believe it's a almost confirmed rumor, is that it's going to be based off of the NVIDIA Tegra X2, which is a mobile chipset that NVIDIA designed for mobile devices, tablets, phones, whatever. It's called a system on chip. It's basically a processor and GPU in one. The thing about those is they're not as efficient on battery as, say, what's in your phone regularly, which are usually based off of an ARM chipset, but they're more powerful. So it'll have better graphics than your mobile phone or a tablet would have in general, but it's not going to be as powerful as a full-blown console. We know that the Tegra X2 can do 4K video, but that may be more akin to just video and not graphics capabilities. It may not be able to run the resolution of 4K at high polygons. Now, that being said, one of the things that they can do is they can make it output at one resolution to a TV and they can make it output a different resolution to its local tablet screen, which the higher the resolution, the more battery you use. So a lower resolution screen on a phone or on a tablet is going to use less battery than an equivalent with same processor with a higher resolution.
Makes sense.
So what they can probably do is when you pull that tablet out of its dock, it'll switch from a 1080p resolution for a regular high definition TV down to a 720p resolution, which means it's going to use a lot less battery and therefore last longer on its mobile setting.
Okay. But based off the very limited information we know, no idea how long that battery might last. There's just no real way to know.
Yeah, we don't know. And I was hoping that maybe Nintendo had taken a page out of the Microsoft Surface book and done a situation where that there's a secondary graphics processor in the dock that kind of boosts its performance. But
we've seen things come out that say that that's not a thing.
They've now officially Nintendo has officially stated that it is just a dock for connection to the TV and a charger.
Something that was curious though, and I noticed this in the trailer, there are 2 ports coming out of the dock, but the ports in the trailer don't have anything connected to them, but it's still outputting through the TV. Now, there's a chance there was a technical oversight there, and that was just the graphical output, but it was 2. Why would it have 2 outputs on the dock? And maybe they were inputs too, I'm not sure, but there were 2 ports.
I mean, it could be any number of things. It could be a expansion cable of some sort. It could be used for charging the Joy controller. Or the Joy-Con.
The Joy-Cons. Yeah, Brent just found out that those were the names. Did you notice, speaking of the Joy-Cons, did you notice that there was a plus button and a minus button at the top, which isn't anything new. They've had those since the Wii remotes. And there was also a circle button and a square button on the bottom. Now, that was really curious to me, and I couldn't figure out why it had a circle button and a square button till Brent brought up a very valid point. When you remove the, Joy-Cons from the tablet display and use them as little baby controllers, which looks like it's a super cool thing that it can do that, but that's straight up desperation move. Like, you would never use that, especially with our giant octopus hands.
You would use that when you're out camping and for some reason don't think that camping is good enough for you.
I'm about to say, if I'm taking that thing with me camping, I have made a mistake planning somewhere.
Right.
Because, anyways. So, Brent speculated that the reason there is a square and a circle primarily is so that way the functionality still exists if 2 people are using the Joy-Cons.
Well, to me, it also looked like one of the 2 halves of the Joy-Con had a camera built into it.
I did not see that. Was that just the little circle thing?
Yeah, except if you notice, it looks clear and like it's got a chamfered bezel around it, kind of like you find on most phones.
I can't say I noticed that. Brent, did you know? Interesting. Yeah, you can go ahead and try looking that up. So while Jake is looking that up, we will talk about a couple other features. Something interesting that was not known in the trailer was NFC functionality. However, Nintendo has come out since then and said NFC functionality will be integrated, which makes perfect sense because I think the ratio of Amiibo to Wii U's is about 3-1.
It is. I honestly really thought the Amiibos were a Wii U thing. The Wii was gone. They were gone.
I thought they were going to be around for a while because those things have made them absolute bank, even if the magic has gone, so to speak. However, one thing that wasn't in the trailer that was interesting. Brent, did you want to bring up what we didn't see in the trailer that the Wii U specifically has?
Dual screens.
Well, dual screens, and there's no touch functionality.
Right.
So, in addition to there not being dual screens, which for the most part, let's be 100% frank here, not a lot of things have capitalized on the dual screens, which is a real bummer because there have been some instances where it's been done amazingly. But for the most part, but the fact they haven't shown a touch screen, that's kind of a big deal because that means that it would be incredibly difficult to port over a lot of Wii U games without significant reworking. And though they didn't ride this pony nearly as hard as some of the other publishers, developers in this current generation, they still put out Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD. I feel like there's Was that the only 2 HD ones they put out?
Yeah. The only HD remakes, yes.
Okay. Now, Jake, you have it
Yeah,
pulled up.
so real quick, it's not actually a camera, it's the home button.
Okay, so that was the circle button.
Yeah.
So do you see the square button?
Yeah, and it's got a circle in it. But it's just an indented circle. It's not like it's a lens or anything. So
Okay.
I thought the home button was... Because it looks the way it's got a circle around it that's molded upwards.
I mean, I can see
it. Looks kind of like a camera, and in lower resolution photos, the house button looks kind of like, glass.
So 3, I wonder if that's a power button.
Yeah, that would make sense.
That might be a power button. That'd be a really bad location for a power button. Well, no, that's not a lot different with the 3DS.
It's about where it is on the Wii U.
Except it's in the bottom. That might be a power button.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, that's a perfectly acceptable answer. I'm trying to think of some more of the stuff that they showed us. Was there anything else hardware-wise that really jumped out? So it converted from portable. It had the slide-off controller. The Pro controller, they did show us a Pro controller, which is really no surprise. They also showed that you can put both sides of the Joy-Con onto a central unit. It is my belief, my personal belief, that the central unit for the Joy-Con, when you put it together, that will act as the NFC reader. I also think that the screen itself will have an NFC reader in it, personally.
Well, and I also kind of wondered if maybe that center section of the
Joy-Con
would actually be touch sensitive, kind of like how the PlayStation
PlayStation
4 controllers are.
That's an interesting point.
I have no idea if it is. They did not show that functionality, but I almost wonder. It looks like a perfectly flat surface that would be very good for that.
But of all the functionalities, I think the main stuff showed in that 3.5-minute trailer was showing us the Switch, putting the Joy-Cons on the...
It was showing
the potential, and that's one of the reasons why they supposedly didn't put in the touch functionality on the screen, because they want it to be a group activity device. They want you to be able to bring that somewhere and have like a group of friends play with it.
And that does roll into the next idea is we saw very strong evidence of local Wi-Fi co-op. So that jumped out in a big way. We saw they were showing people playing NBA 2K16 or some nonsense against each other. We saw people playing
Mario Kart.
Well, they weren't playing it against each other, but they were playing on a split screen. Mm-hmm. So that was 2 people. So the idea there is then what's being presented there, I'm curious, is if you guys, you and Jake, were to have a Switch and I had a Switch, could me and Kara play against you and Jake? Or if you're on local Wi-Fi, can it only be you? That's something I'm curious about because they never showed... Well, they did with the 2K, with the NBA 2K. 2 guys were playing 1.
4,
yeah. So it was a 2v2 in that case.
Mm-hmm.
So the possibilities brought up. So I think that's all the hardware stuff that really jumped out at me. So we'll spend these last handful of minutes talking about potential game stuff they showed, which was very shocking because overall, I didn't expect much out of this. We'll talk about final impressions near the end. This blew my expectations away. As far as the game stuff goes, does anybody want to touch on any of them before me?
Real quick, the one thing I'd say is, so because this is based off of an NVIDIA Tegra, it's not going to be as powerful as, say, the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4. So it's going to be harder to port their games over to it. It's not going to be as powerful.
We'll touch on that part.
So to say, he actually has a thing.
We'll touch on that.
But beyond that, yeah, I saw several games that look interesting on that console. And I know which one you're chomping at the bit to probably talk about.
Well, I'm chomping at the bit to talk about all of them for various reasons. But one thing I brought up to Brent about the whole technical heavy lifting that these systems can theoretically do is I think it was the infamous developer Naughty Dog, the one who did. They were saying with the first Infamous game near the beginning of the PS3's life cycle that they were using approximately 10% of its processing power. With Infamous 2, which was significantly longer on, closer to the end, and Naughty Dog did a lot of development in general, they were using about 30%.
Right.
So if you have a system that can do 100 things, but it's only ever doing 30, and you have a system like Nintendo's, which can only do 50 things, but they're doing 45, I would prefer a system like Nintendo's that's mostly utilizing their capabilities as opposed to an underutilized system, which isn't to say that all games were underutilized, but I feel like that dedicated Nintendo developers really try.
Well, and that's That's one of the problems of being a proprietary technology, because the PlayStation 3 was very complicated. And developers, if you ask developers, they will tell you that it is probably the worst console to ever have to develop for. They spent so long learning how to squeeze performance out of that system. Even though it was very powerful, it was very hard to do so, whereas something like the Xbox 360 was much simpler.
But I've heard the argument that for the past 3 generations, they basically split from those consoles before any of them were ever using the max to their capability.
Yeah, well, so modern ones, the Xbox One, they are based off of x86 technology. PC programmers know how to work in that all day long. So it's much easier for them to squeeze the proper performance out of them from the get-go, as opposed to having a terrible learning curve, which is a potential problem with the Tegra, although the Tegra is based off of x86 technology and regular GPU. So they'll still be able to squeeze a lot out, but because that learning curve isn't as steep, they're going to hit their max a lot earlier than they would on other modern consoles, like the 1 and the 4.
So that was my thought on it. I'm interested to see who develops for it, but that rolls us into games real quick. First thing we're going to talk about is going to be the thing that immediately got everybody excited and then disappointed, because one of the first games they showed was that Skyrim thing. And we talked about this shortly, I think it was earlier today or maybe yesterday, how they showed Skyrim. And at the time I said, well, why would they show Skyrim if they weren't actually going to try to put it on there? Then it came out that Skyrim isn't confirmed for this system.
Now, that being said, I'm pretty sure in order to use that as a promotional thing, they had to have an agreement from Bethesda.
They had to have an agreement, and they even...
Well, it even says Bethesda.
Yeah.
Well, yes, there's a copyright to it, but that's different than having an agreement saying, yes, you can use this in your promotional video.
So, yeah, it hasn't been confirmed. Now, that doesn't mean it's not happening, but it doesn't mean it is happening just because it was in there. As far as them, they put it in the show that, yeah, we're going to have adult games. And a lot of people were psyched about it for a second, unless they were real cynical, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Let's talk about the games they showed that were entirely unexpected. The most unexpected game, what would you guys say?
Unexpected game? Honestly, I only paid attention to 2 of them.
So Mario Kart, I will contest only because a lot of people didn't really expect what a lot of people didn't notice. Nobody was expecting them to show new gameplay from a new 3D Mario. That was 100% out of left field.
Based on the comments that Miyamoto made at E3, I mean, when he said the earliest you'll see the next Mario that I'm working on next E3, I mean, yeah, that's in the 6-month window, but that's...
So, I'm used to, and everybody's used to, when a new Nintendo console comes out at this point, we get one game right when the system comes out, and then it's kind of whatever for a little while.
Yeah, one that supposedly showcases what it's capable of. I mean, the N64 had Mario 64.
Right.
The Super Nintendo had Super Mario World.
Mm-hmm. It had Star Fox, too. 64.
Star Fox was late.
No.
Yeah, that required the VX chip. That came much later.
We're gonna start past this totally off topic. I was surprised to see something that essentially looked like a Super Mario 3D World. That was not what I was expecting. So that surprised me. I'm really curious to see more about that. But Mario Kart. Now, Jake, did you play Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U? If you did, it would only be in passing.
I did not.
Okay. Now, Brent, did you just think it was Mario Kart 8?
No. I mean, I assumed straight out it was a new Mario Kart.
Okay. A lot of people I talked to assumed it was Mario Kart 8.
Yeah.
And I could see why they thought that, because it showed a track that was playable in Mario Kart 8. However, it originated on the GameCube, and 2 things that jumped out to me was the fact that one of the characters it showed was King Boo, a character not in Mario Kart 8, but he could have easily been added in as an extra character. What really jumped out to me more than anything was you can hold 2 items. You haven't been able to do that since Double Dash, I believe.
Yeah.
So, to me, a distinct change in gameplay like that again, to me that says no, and there weren't 2 characters riding on it either. So, what that brief moment of silence there was me realizing, are they just bringing Double Dash to this thing? That's what gears just turned in my head.
I mean, so with the power of this particular console, it's probably going to be N64, maybe GameCube games level quality. I don't think you're going to see any Wii or Wii U games. Maybe some Wii if they're really good at squeezing the performance, but I don't think you're going to see that very often on this console because it doesn't have the power of, say, the Wii U at all.
Really?
Yeah.
But the
Wii U is based off of a PowerPC chip, which IBM uses in mainframes.
But does that mean Breath of the Wild will look better on Wii U than the Switch?
Maybe, although they'll probably have a custom compile for it, but it's developed from the ground up to work on this console. Anything that's on the Wii U will not be.
As far as Breath of the Wild goes, I'm trying my hardest not to get on the hype train because that has derailed to horrific outcomes for me before. So I don't want to watch all the gameplay. I don't want to get too excited. Even though it's Zelda and I'll buy it and I'll probably love it. I haven't loved all of them. Looking at you, Skyward Sword. Not the worst one, not the best one. I haven't watched much. It looked great. They also showed in Splatoon. I don't know if that's going to be new. I don't know if it's going to be an updated version. So I don't know if it's going to be a Splatoon 2 or a Splatoon 1.5. It showed a new arena, new hairstyles, clothes, and the starting formation was slightly different, but I'm not sure if they're going to change enough to call this Splatoon 2. Let's go ahead and wrap this up real fast. Brent, what are your expectations from this system? Try to keep it brief. Go.
All right, I'm hoping that they do not blow their load on games in the first year.
Now, when you say blow their load, do you mean games put out solely through Nintendo? Do you mean...
I mean all their major properties. I don't want them just shooting out everything. I mean, I doubt a Smash is going to be out in the first year. I'll be shocked if it's out in the first 2.
Unless it's a complete edition.
Yeah, and I actually expect that. So, that's an expectation.
Now, you got more?
And a more robust virtual console.
And I gotta agree with him on that one because the Wii U's virtual console slowed down tremendously and got weirdly inconsistent.
Probably because of its slow sales.
Yeah, that couldn't help. Calling it the Wii, everything about that went wrong. Which kind of goes into the fact they're releasing the Switch in March is not the worst idea in the world. It is my belief that they're going to use the 9 months to build brand recognition to put out mobile games that will tie into console games, that then people who play the mobile games will have a reason to buy the console. And by the time Christmas rolls around, not only will everybody properly know what a Switch is, there'll be a ton of motivation to buy it from external forces. That is my belief. But what are your expectations, Jake?
Well, my expectations are they've announced all of these third-party developers for the console, and I really hope that that's not just, oh yeah, we have them signed on, but is actually, no, all of these people have games that are ready to release within the first year.
That is incredibly ambitious, and unfortunately, the Wii U had a very similar list, so I got a big grain of salt.
That's kind of what I fear, but it's such a shame. Nintendo used to have a great third-party development platform, and now, since the Wii, it's been really lackluster, and it's such a shame.
It's been really lackluster. Something I noticed, and I pointed this out to one of my classmates when I was much younger, you saw a significant uptick in M-related games around the time of the PS2, Xbox, all those. And Nintendo never really had a large agenda with that, which I'm not going to call Nintendo kiddie, but a lot of people saw this new option, and I feel like that's what they went with. So I'm hoping Nintendo brings enough people into the fold that they can get some solid third parties back on. I don't think it's really going to go toe-to-toe with the PS4 and Xbox One, but I think it's going to have a different experience that I really hope they're able to sell people on by Christmas of 2017.
So it's like, we don't know it can't go toe-to-toe with the Xbox One, so...
We don't. So
they have sales numbers.
The other expectation that I'm hoping for is that they release this in any other color besides just black and white. I want to see, like we did in the N64 and the GameCube eras, where you could get a bright orange or a gold. I want to see a Zelda Gold version.
You did mention that. I'm not averse to something that's got a little flash to it myself. But anyway, I just absolutely wanted to put together this hype minisode because that Switch episode had me hype. So Thank you, Brent, for giving me your thoughts on this one.
Yep.
Thank you, Jake, for giving me your thoughts on this one.
Yep.
Don't forget to jump on socials and tell us what you thought about the Switch announcement. And until next time, this is Co-Opinions.